session is Dr. Shreya Mishra. Dr. Shreya Mishra is currently working as an assistant professor at Birla Institute of Management Technology, BIMTech, Great Noida, India. She completed her doctoral studies in 2019 in the field of workspace bullying, which has been awarded the Jagdish Seth Best Thesis Award 2020. She serves as an assistant editor of the South Asian Journal of Management Cases, SAGE, and co-track chair at NAGPUR Conference 2021-22. She has published in and reviewed for Scopus and ABDC journals, a recipient of the Young Scholar Award and SAGE Best Paper Award at the International Conference of Management Cases. Her research interests include studies on workspace bullying, inequality, power, identity, intersectionality, and qualitative research methods. Dr. Shreya is extensively involved in creating awareness about the qualitative research through workshops and webinars as the core member of Center of Management Case Development at BIMTech. I now request Dr. Shreya Mishra to take over the session. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you so much. May I know the name of the person who is speaking right now?
Vinay Pradeep.
Okay, thank you so much, Vinay. So, just a minute. It's an important call that I have to take. I cannot remove it. Just a second.
Sure, ma'am.
Okay, so I think this is the last day of the entire webinar. Is it the last day?
No, ma'am. This is the second session. There's one more session.
No. For the entire. It started on 25th, and today is the last day.
Today is day 4, ma'am.
Day 4.
Tomorrow
Okay.
is day 5. Tomorrow will be the last day.
And mostly the sessions have been focused on teaching cases, if I'm not wrong.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So the session that I'm taking essentially needs a lot of input from the audiences as well. So I had requested Deepika ma'am, if at all, either the audiences can speak or at least put their things in the chat. That would be great, because otherwise it's not going to make sense much. Right? So
yeah.
Fine. So chat will be available?
Yes, ma'am. Participants, kindly note, if you have any questions, you can post the same on the chat box. And if you don't have the access to the chat box, you can raise your digital hand and we will give you the option of unmuting.
Okay, that would be great. So let me just check if I'm able to share my screen. Is it visible?
Yes, ma'am, it is.
Okay, and you can see the presentation as well now?
Right now, we can see your MS Teams screen.
Okay.
I think you have shared the whole screen, if I'm not wrong.
Yes.
Ma'am, there are two options. One is share screen and one is share window.
I actually wanted to share the entire screen because I wanted to juggle between a couple of things.
Okay.
So that is why I had tried. Let me see if that works. Otherwise, I'll share the window. Super. Okay.
And we can see the screen.
Okay.
Yeah. Now we can see the PPT.
Great. And it is on full screen now, right? Yeah. Fine.
Yes, ma'am. It's in full screen.
So, almost good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for having me today. I can see that there are quite a few people today, so I would want you to interact as much as possible, because what we will be doing needs your inputs a lot. So please be a bit more, rather than being relaxed and just listening, please be a little more attentive in the journalist's perspective of attentive. Now, coming to the relevance of this webinar. Now, as it was just mentioned that I have, been a part of South Asian Journal of Business and Management Cases as an assistant editor, and I joined it in 2019, just after my PhD got over. And when I joined, I came to know that this journal was established in 2012, and it was primarily a teaching case journal. So we were only publishing teaching cases for the majority of its life. However, recently we have shifted to qualitative case study research. Now, the word case remains the same, but the shift has taken from teaching cases to qualitative research study. Now, this is where the problem lies, because there was a surge in submissions as we got listed in Scopus and ABS journal listings, and we suddenly had a lot of submissions coming in, which we were really happy about. But at the same time, most of these submissions were getting rejected. Now, although the submissions are coming higher in number, but the pipeline was reducing because mostly the cases were getting rejected. And so we realized that the cases that were getting rejected, only few of them were actually teaching cases, while the other few were research papers. They were not research studies, case research studies. They were essentially research papers. So qualitative case study research has a proper structure and a research design and all. So that was not followed. So we had to reject them because they were good research papers and they were good teaching cases, but they did not fall in the scope of the journal. But these were only very few. And most of the cases that were getting rejected were essentially a fusion between a teaching case and a research case. Because we had announced that we are shifting from a teaching case journal to a research case journal. So people started trying to send research cases, but they did not understand where the difference lied between a teaching and a research case. So mostly the cases that came were, some kind of mutation of the two. So it was not really something that we could do much about. Initially, we tried to review a lot of cases, but we realized that there are too many and we cannot review everything and we cannot give a very detailed review for all the cases. And so we came up with this common rejection email, which essentially suggests that your submission is interesting and can add value to the current knowledge on whatever the phenomenon they are studying. You have also collected qualitative data, because case research generally needs you to collect qualitative data. So people used to write that we have collected interview data, we had collected focus group data. So they did claim to have qualitative data, but the components of the qualitative case study research were always missing. As the research process was never shown, the structure was not appropriate, and the sentences were mostly opinions. Now, that is why we also said that because you have tried to include some elements of research process in this, it does not qualify to be a teaching case either. So that what people used to do was that when we rejected them, they directly sent to a case research, teaching case journal or teaching case repository like Case Center or Ivy, and they also faced rejection from there. So we started telling them that this is not a teaching case either. This is a simple description of facts. And so although your case has a potential to develop into a good qualitative case study research, but in the current form, we cannot take it. Now, this was a mail that was sent so frequently that we thought that we need to, start telling people where the bifurcation lies. Now, I want you to tell me, where do you think is the basic point of difference? Now, you have had some sessions since 25th. Where do you think the basic point of difference lies? Anyone?
Participants, you can raise your digital hand or you can put your comment in the chat box.
May I?
Yes.
Yeah, so it could be because they have not understood, the writers have not understood the real problem, and try to bring it down in words.
Okay, the real problem in the sense, the problem in the case itself?
Yeah, the problem in the case itself. They would have probably understood the case, but they don't know how to word it properly.
Okay, so if you had to say that, you know, this is a research case and this is a teaching case, how would you word each of them? Just thought process, like, you know, you don't have to have the right answer, just.
So the teaching case could have more of theories and, concepts explained.
Mm-hmm.
And the research may have what are the implications of the theories and the concepts in the real scenario.
Okay, fair enough. So if I had to word it down in a very basic point of view, it would be that one is for disseminate. So teaching case is for disseminating knowledge. So your wordings has to be in such a way that you're disseminating, you're telling what the current knowledge is. What are the concepts about, how they are explained in that case, because you want the students to understand those concepts, and so you do that through a teaching case, and so you're disseminating knowledge, while in a research case you're creating knowledge. Now people often forget that when you're creating knowledge, you have to go through that process of creating knowledge. You cannot say that we have collected data, because data is collected in both the cases. You cannot write a teaching case without collecting data. But in a research case, you delve in that data to create knowledge. In teaching case, you delve in that data to explain what is going on, keeping in mind the concepts that you want to teach. So that is the basic point of difference. And because of that, the teaching case is a pedagogical tool, while a research case has case study as the research design. So that is where the psyche lies. So you have to teach in the class, you take a teaching case study, you want to understand a phenomenon better, create a new theory, you again take a case study, but the process will be absolutely different. Any questions here? Okay, I take that as a no. Now this is a very logical thing to know, you know, that the one is for teaching and one is for research, but the problem basically lies in the word itself, the case study, because case study is not only used in teaching and research, but it is also used in journalism, it is used in history studies, biographies, storybooks, movies, and so on and so forth. So we are essentially surrounded by case studies in different formats. And so when we start writing on it, we try to include, unknowingly, try to include all of them in one manuscript. And so we face death rejection, right? So when we are writing a case, whether it is for a pedagogical tool in teaching classroom, or is it for creating knowledge, we need to remember what forms we are supposed to use in that. So opinions are often found when people write, this has happened, so this must have happened, right? Without giving any justification. So you are using journalism. When you get too much into context or too much into history of the things which is not required, you get into history studies. So you, as an author, one has to remember what are the relevant things and why we are writing the case, so that we stick to the format that we want to write on. I hope that is making sense. Those who can speak can just let me know if it's making sense till here.
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, thank you so much. Now, just for your knowledge, in academic writing, we essentially focus on teaching and research case, and they are also known as discussion-based cases. So teaching cases are also known as discussion-based cases, and research cases are also known as case study research. So I'll be using them synonymously throughout the session today. Okay, and to explain the difference between the two, what I'll be doing is I'm taking example of a case unit, Weed Meat Burger. And the authors have written a teaching case on it, as well as they have also written a research case on it. So the organization is the same, the case unit is the same, and there are two outputs. There's a teaching case and a research case. So I'll show snapshots of the entire manuscript, the relevant snapshots of their manuscript, so that you can see the difference between the two and how they come out, how the end product comes out. Okay. And this is where I would really want people to step in and tell their thoughts and, you know, speak out whenever there is a possibility for them to speak out. So just to put things in perspective, Weed Meat Burger is a food joint which was established in Kazakhstan. And the teaching case was the first product that came that was presented in NACRA. NACRA is a North American Case Research Conference, which happens every year. And it is one of the best. It's kind of the mecca of case research, teaching case conference. So they had submitted this teaching case on Weed Meat Burgers over there. It is a case on entrepreneurship, and they were selected, and it was one of the best papers over there. And then the authors went on to write a research case on it. So these are the two examples that we'll be taking forward from. Now these are the title of the case. So on the left side, it is the teaching case, Weed Meat Burgers and Wemmer's Coffee, the challenges of a serial entrepreneur. And on the right side is the research case, which is recently published in our journal, Religion as a Dominant Logic for Entrepreneurial Activities, Theorizing the Dynamics in and Around Weed Meat Burger, Kazakhstan. Now, what I would want you to do is to try and comprehend the components of the title. So we'll start with the teaching case and then we'll go to the research case. So this is the title of the teaching case. Take a minute, take your thoughts together and tell me what are the components, what are the things that you can see are specifically included in the title of the teaching case.
Ma'am, I can see a dilemma that is put forth. Just in the title, there is a dilemma because challenges can create a dilemma for an entrepreneur. This is my observation.
Yes. Anybody else? Seisha, I can see.
Good morning, ma'am. What I can see is, as correctly pointed out just now, there's a dilemma regarding challenges. And one more thing, since this is a case study, I think they have moreover focused on how as an entrepreneur, the growth has happened after overcoming the challenges. So I think these are the two aspects they might have taken up in the teaching case.
Yeah, but let's just focus on the title right now and you'll see what happens in the teaching case. Let's just focus on the title right now. So a dilemma is essentially,
Yeah, there's one more thing that I can see. An entrepreneur, if successful, would go ahead with one, one product or whatever he's trying to go ahead with. Here, it is a serial entrepreneur, so there could be a series of failures by which it is proceeding further. That's what I can see in this as well, in the title.
Okay, we'll take one more answer and then I'll just. Anybody? I could see a couple of hands raised. Okay. So essentially, the title has the organization name. Obviously, the organization has been informed. Most of the titles of teaching case will obviously have the name of the organization. The vaguely stated issue, the dilemma that was being talked about, right? The challenges, but we don't know what the challenges are, so they are vaguely stated. And the phenomenon that the case will address, that is the serial entrepreneurship, as well as the protagonist. Here, you don't know, you're not putting the name of the protagonist, but a serial entrepreneur will be the protagonist. That is obvious. So these three things are, included in the title of the teaching case, which essentially is enigmatic. So a title of a teaching case has to be enigmatic. It has to create curiosity because you want the students to be able to engage in the case. So if the title is, curious, if the title is vague, if the title is enigmatic, students will want to read the case. So that is so. Bottom line is the teaching case title will always be loosely defined. You will not know from the title what is going on. You can just keep guessing what is going on. So it is vague in nature, right? Now coming to the introduction. Now what I've done here is throughout the presentation, there are snapshots of the entire cases, teaching and research cases, and I've color coded the sections of the teaching and the research case. I want you to read it and then give your thoughts on what are these color codes, like what are they explaining, what are the different colors trying to describe. So take a minute, read it, and I would really want the organizers to keep an eye on people who are raising their hand. Thank you.
Sure. Dr. Chavi Jain, I've given you the option of unmuting. And Ms. Shisha.
So anybody?
Ma'am, from the first part of it, the red color, I think, is denoting factual information. Like it is saying June 2020, and it is referring on Kazakhstan, south capital of Kazakhstan. And I think, moreover, territory of Modio Mountain, sports complex. So factual details are mentioned here over here. So the red color, I think, is more of factual details.
Okay. Anybody else? And any more points on other colors?
Ma'am, another thing, this is
Reena, Ma'am, you can continue.
Ma'am, may I?
Okay. So I think the orange part, competition was getting tougher, is basically putting forth a area of where they need to work on the problem. Basically, they are trying to highlight the problem with the orange color. The competition was getting tougher with every passing day. So I think this is an area which was bothering them.
Okay. Yes. Reena Dongre was also.
Yes. Ma'am, I would like to say that the purple color that denotes dramatization.
Yes.
Which we just want to create that introduction, and that's why that purple lines, though those are not necessary facts, but then just to create the background, those purple lines have been added, which is a dramatization.
Okay, great. So essentially, both of them are correct. You also want to put in some kind of facts that is going on, but essentially it is dramatization. So you build up the story. When a person or a student is starting to read the teaching case, they should be able to relate immediately to it, and that is why you start with the story. You start to build, you make the student feel that they're a part of the story and they themselves are going through it. So you build up the story. That is how you started. Then you're also introducing the protagonist, because you want the students to put themselves in the shoes of the protagonist. So you immediately introduce the protagonist, and then you introduce the organization, and that is when you also start building up the tension. And obviously, what someone said, building up the dilemma, right? Because dilemma is the crux of the entire teaching case. That is where you want the student to focus on. So your dilemma has to come in the first first few lines itself. And so the dilemma is always in the introduction, in the couple of first few lines, and you strengthen that dilemma so that it gets embedded in the minds of the student, and the rest of the story revolves around that dilemma, right? And you finally obviously end the introduction with a storyline, and you connect with the next section. So this is how the introduction of a teaching case should look like. So you're building up the story, you're introducing the protagonist, you're telling which is the case organization, and you're building the dilemma, and then you're connecting to the next. Now, this is a longer section, but I would want you to read it because it's very important. So read it and tell me what. So there are only 3 things happening over here. So it should not be too much of a hassle. Take a couple of minutes here, please. Thank you.
Is this just details about the background, the case, that is not as much important as the fundamental concepts?
Okay. You think it is
Here
not
I
as
see the
yeah.
protagonist, his story being highlighted because there was an exhibit 1 in the teaching case itself, and his name and when he was born and all his details have been shown over here. So the protagonist has been highlighted in this particular piece.
Yes. So can somebody say why is so much information given on the protagonist?
Because we need to know whether how successful he was, why he's called a serial entrepreneur as per the title.
So essentially, you connect back to the title and you show that why this particular protagonist is relevant and is a good case to study for this, to explain the concepts of entrepreneurship. So another thing that is absolutely important is the contextual factor. So you can see that it is showing that he was born in the Soviet Union era, and then when he took over, it was post Soviet Union, and that is the contextual factor. Every case, be it a teaching case or a research case, revolves around the context of the matter. Research paper may we try to reduce the context because we want to generalize it. In teaching cases as well as research cases, context becomes kind of the hero of the thing, because context will change what is happening, right? So the important contextual elements are given. Also establishing the traits of the protagonist as an entrepreneur, because we are saying that we are trying to study entrepreneurship and you have taken a protagonist, you also have to establish that why this particular protagonist is good enough example of an entrepreneur. So you're giving a background that his father was already owning a business. He had graduated from a B school, so he had understanding of business. He also had a small venture, informal venture, so he had done some kind of entrepreneurial activity. Then he also started working as an accountant, but he was not happy with it, and so because he was not empowered and the creativity was lost in that job, so he tried to come back to his business. So the entrepreneurial traits are being established, and that is what happens in background. You essentially develop the importance of the case. The case can be the individual, the case can be the organization, but you have to develop the importance of the case based on what you're trying to explain to the students. Finally, coming to the background of the business and then connecting to the next section. Now here I would want to take a minute. I would want you to think about what should come in the next section, maybe write it down, and then we'll see what was there in the next section. So just think about what should come immediately after this.
Ma'am, is it going to start the next session with the qualitative data?
Okay, so what do you mean by qualitative data?
Like little bit elaboration about all the like data related to the restaurant and what is the scenario of the restaurant on particular time related to that.
Okay,
Maybe.
so essentially the details of the restaurants that are mentioned in the last line is what you're trying to say.
Right.
Anybody else?
About business expansion?
about business expansion. Okay, so where they should start from business expansion. So should they include these three, or should they just start after that?
In fact, the other three are not so important because the case does not speak about the other three. The title speaks about weed meat and coffee. Yeah, so this will not be important as we go ahead.
Thank you so much. So essentially, what you just said was absolutely to the point. What often authors do. So recently, Professor Day and myself were attending this webinar by the Case Journal, and it was essentially for Indian authors only, Indian teaching case authors only, and they had specially organized that webinar because we ended up the Indian authors were getting too many desk rejections from their end. So they also wanted to explain, where you are going wrong. And one of the things that was prominently coming in their webinar was that too much focus on the past data, which is not relevant, is included in the case. So a novice case writer would have immediately jumped to the three restaurant names. Kahan se start hua, what was his father doing, and probably the details of the restaurant, which was not relevant to the case. You have to give some information, but not the entire story of it, because the focus is on entrepreneurship. That is what you want the students to study. So you do not give any extra information which will deviate from what you want them to study, right? So the next section, if you can see, just read it through and you will understand that very briefly they have explained what happened with the three business. So in this first paragraph, they have finished with the first three business and then talked about the venture that he was focusing on, the case that it focuses on. Okay. So when we are writing a case, we need to remember what is relevant for the case. Well, I'm talking about teaching case. So we need to remember what is relevant for the teaching case, what is relevant for the students to know, and what is not relevant, and accordingly chuck out your extra information. Now, this is where the rest of the case. So the challenges, so this is where we build the hook. You must have heard the word hook maybe in different sessions until now. Hook is the thing, the dilemma is the main crux. That is where the student has to identify what to do and where to do, and to help him understand or help him take decision on that dilemma, the hook is created. So it revolves around that dilemma only. So where the business started, what were the challenges? Because you're talking about the challenges in the title. Okay, what were the challenges? What were the actions taken for those challenges? And eventually, the entire case revolves. And I've not shown the entire thing, but after this ideation thing, they show the actions that the protagonist took, the contextual issues that were important here, because the contextual issues were relevant for the actions that the protagonist took. And so the case goes on like that. So if I quickly share the case, can you see the case here? Okay. Can you see the case?
Yes, ma'am, this was all.
Yeah. So from here on, they're explaining what happened to what the things that the protagonist did. They're talking about starting of Weed Meat Burgers. They're talking about how they stabilized it. They're talking about because it is a serial entrepreneurship paper, so they are also introducing the next venture that the protagonist started. So this is how the entire, so essentially the focus is on the serial entrepreneurship concept. So for that, they have focused on the first venture and the second venture and the actions that the protagonist took and the challenges that he faced and so on and so forth. So that is where the entire hook will revolve around, right? And throughout this, you will see that the voice of the protagonist is always there, because you want the students to be able to empathize with the protagonist. The voice of the protagonist is always a good thing to include, actually what they said. So quotes from the interviews itself should be included, because that helps the students to relate easier with the protagonist. Now this is the end of the, so generally in cases in HBR go on for like 10, 20, 30 pages. This is, it starts in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and that's it, 5-page case, right? So they have explained the challenges and now they're concluding it. Now here I want you to again read it and tell me what you can see. So the first paragraph will not make much sense, because for that you need to have information, but it is essentially the closing paragraph of where the person is right now. So any thoughts, any point of views here? Anyone?
So ultimately, we can see that he is planning on closing the both the ventures because they are not profitable, and he has got time to think over it because it's COVID. So bringing the people back to a situation or a situation which is realistic or real now, how they can relate to it, especially COVID. What would you do if you were in a situation where you have to these are your babies and you have to give them up because it's no longer running because of COVID? So what are the next, or what is the next step? So it's bringing the reader to that.
Yes. So essentially, it is bringing the reader back to the dilemma. In any teaching case, you start with the dilemma and you end up with a dilemma. No matter what is there in between, but the starting and the end should be with the dilemma. Right? So the information in the middle is to help them to be able to take decisions to solve that dilemma. But so that the students don't forget what they started with, that's why you end up with a dilemma. So this is how a short teaching case looks like. One very important thing about not just teaching case, not just research case, but all the kind of research papers that we write is that if you have exhibits or annexures or tables or figures at the end of your paper, please do not forget to put a reference of it. A lot of papers get rejected because of this foresight. What people often do is they send too many supplementary files in the main case itself, which is not really relevant in the content of the case. So you may have 3, 4, 5, 6 exhibits, but if you look back in the case, you will not find any reference for it. Exhibit 1, exhibit 2, it's never there. So if it is not there, if it is not relevant, remove it from the main case itself. If it is there, if it is important, then mention where it is important. So this is something that is hygiene factor, but we often forget, and that really irritates a lot of reviewers. They say that kya matlab, they don't even have this kind of, you know, the mental capacity to remember that the exhibits are supposed to be referred in the main cases. So we get a lot of backlash from the reviewers because of that. So these are certain hygiene factors. Now the case is over. Coming to the teaching note, I think the first session, I don't know about the rest of the session, but in the first session, Professor Day, he must have talked about two things that are included in a teaching note. One is content and one is process. So the content is essentially what is the case about and where to use it. Right. So the objective of the case will come in the content, which subject it should be used in will come in the context. The synopsis of the case teaching, the entire case will come in the content, and obviously the suggested reading. Followed by the process. Now the process, in this case, what the authors have done is they have not given research or teaching questions. Mostly you will find questions in a teaching case, but the authors of this particular teaching case are of opinion that if we give questions to the faculty, then it becomes a little difficult for them to create their own questions. So what they do is they just give discussion points and they show a teaching plan for it. So if I go back to the paper, so they have given objectives, use in class, synopsis, suggested reading, and teaching plan, wherein they have never given questions. They have simply said case, background, and elements of entrepreneurship, because you want the students to know what is entrepreneurship, so the basics. So instead of giving what are the elements of entrepreneurship, they have just mentioned that this is what we have covered. The faculty can decide what to do about it later on. Similarly, difference between regular business and entrepreneurial. So faculty has the liberty to create their own questions out of it, and they have given the process of how to take it, how much time will it take. So any teaching note will have all these, right? So the content and the process is always there in a teaching note. But there's something missing. Anybody, what is it that is missing in a teaching note? Anyone? Was there something missing in the teaching note?
It's not telling what's happening next. That's what I could see.
Okay. So you're talking about epilogue. Epilogue often is a part of teaching note wherein the author gives extra information to the faculty, which the faculty can use to as a discussion in the class if he wants to direct the students in the direction of what actually happened. So students do not have this information, but the faculty has the information of what actually happened. So after the dilemma, the case always stops at a dilemma, but obviously in real life the organization is not waiting for people to solve the dilemma. So the epilogue is essentially what actually happened, and the faculty can use it in the case. But what is the other thing that was missing is,
was there learning objectives?
Learning objectives. Learning objectives, again, that is the questions that you are there. But learning objectives are essentially coming inside this objectives as well. The case gives students exposure to these parameters. So the learning objectives are already there.
So will it be outcomes, the outcome of this case? Like what will they learn after they complete?
So that is a very detailed, case plan, wherein in the modules, the faculty decides that what will be the learning outcomes. In HBR cases, they will show the learning outcomes, but not all cases show the learning outcomes. But what essentially nowadays, most of the case journals which are accepting teaching cases expect you to put in the specific module in which the case should be taught. So if you see here, use in class, they have written, the case is suitable for courses on entrepreneurship or strategic management in graduate and postgraduate programs. The case can also be used in discussion to discuss some issues of succession in family business. But they have never mentioned where exactly, which particular point in the course of entrepreneurship should this be used. This is essential because you do not want, as an author, you know where the case fits best. The faculty does have the liberty to use it, but if you give them the direction, then the case can be better interpreted by the students and it can fall in the right place in the entire module. So specific module, should it come in the first module, in the second module, third module, in that which concept you're trying to explain, so which concept can be explained through this case. So all those details can be included in the teaching note itself. The second thing is reference to Bloom's taxonomy. I don't know whether Bloom's taxonomy has been covered in any of the sessions, but nowadays Bloom's taxonomy ka jo bhi, the levels which the case is addressing to have to be included. So, for example, now I'm not an entrepreneurship faculty, so I think probably the teaching case should fall in the first module itself because it is explaining the concepts, and it is addressing to the 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So there are 1 to 6 levels. Not all levels can be covered in one teaching case, but whichever levels are covered, they should be explained. If you study this particular, so understanding and applying of the concepts can be covered. The students will be able to understand and apply the concepts. If the case is able to address to the analyzing level as well, then you mention that. So essentially, which levels of the Bloom taxonomy the teaching case is covering should be included in this. Make sense till here? Are we on the same page, everyone?
Yes.
Okay. So this was about the teaching case. Any questions till here? Okay, I'll take that as a no. Now, this case was essentially developed, the teaching case was essentially developed as a part of a course. So when they were going through the data and all, they realized that something different is happening, which is not seen in other entrepreneurial businesses. So they decided that they're going to probe further to develop a research case out of it. And that is where this case came into picture. Now, like we did for the teaching case, let us just try to dissect the research case title as well. Let's just focus on the title right now and we'll see how it goes. Take a minute, and because now we are focusing on research case and most of the sessions were on teaching cases. So I would want you to really get yourself involved in research case here, because otherwise it's really difficult to comprehend the entire case from here on.
Ma'am, this is Shirsha. Can I say something?
Yeah, sure.
Ma'am, 3 things I can. Number 1, name of the organization, as you said. Now, dilemma, that religion as a dominant logic, how it affects the entrepreneurial activities. And third, its connection with theorizing dynamics in and around. So basically, they have they have given a hint that where they want to highlight, like which theory they want to connect to, and which is the factor that is challenging for them and the organization on which they want to highlight. So this is the 3 things that I could identify.
The second thing you said is the dilemma, right? I heard that correctly?
Yes, pardon, ma'am, I can't hear you.
The second thing you mentioned was the dilemma?
Yes, ma'am. Yes,
Okay.
ma'am. That there is the dilemma is the second thing, and third is their hint towards theorizing dynamics. That means they want to they are giving a hint that there is a theory underlying which they want to kind of connect with this dilemma.
Okay, fine. Anybody else on that thought? any extra information?
Ma'am, I can see religion as an independent variable because I'm thinking on terms of empirical data that they're going to go into. So religion as an independent variable, and then the rest are looking like dependent variable to me. I might be wrong, just.
Sure. Anyone else? The two interesting point of views. Anybody else?
Socio-cultural impact on business environment.
Okay, so that is what is probably the outcome. But what are the components of the entire title? So if you have to bifurcate in different components, what do you
Dependent and independent variables.
Okay, similar to what I think Cheryl ma'am said.
Yeah.
Okay, so first things first. A research case will never have a dilemma. A research case is essentially like any other research paper, which is trying to extend or develop a theory. A teaching case will have a dilemma because we want the students to be decision makers of the future. So we are leaving them with a dilemma so that they can decide. A research case, the audience of a research case are researchers, faculty members who are doing research, and scholars. So you do not want them to know dilemma. You want to show them how you are contributing to the phenomenon, how you have extended the phenomenon. So you are not looking at dilemma. You are just trying to understand the theory that was there and how you are extending that theory. So there are three main components of any research case. It is the phenomenon, it is the context, and it is the theory. So if you look at it, we start with the main phenomenon, that is the entrepreneurial activity. Main phenomenon, that is the religion. Then Kazakhstan as the context. Now, when we say why context is important, it is because the phenomena is anything that is happening, and phenomena will happen irrespective of which place it is happening in. But the place and the time will define how that phenomena is happening. So think of it as a river flowing. So a river is flowing, it is, it's just going through its path. Now there are certain terrains that come. There could be rocky terrains, there could be immediate deep terrains. And because of that, the flow of the river will change. So in rocky terrains, it may be very fast. It may hit things, and people may end up getting hurt in that kind of. So only experts can flow in that river. While in a deeper terrain, the flow will be very smooth. It will not even feel that it is flowing. So the context is those terrains, and the flow is the phenomena. So the phenomena has to be there in any research case, which is being studied in a given context, because that context is going to change the dynamics of the phenomena. And to understand how it is changing, we generally use a case unit. So we wanted to study entrepreneurial activities. They wanted to study how it is being intersected, how the intersection of religion as a second phenomena with entrepreneurial activities in the context of Kazakhstan will change the dynamics of entrepreneurial activities. And to understand that, they have used case of Reed Mead Burger. So the case unit is a sample that we call in general category of samples, that it is a sample which will explain how the phenomena is able to change in that given context. Finally, obviously the theory will come, and in this case, they have extended that theory and they have come up with a dynamic model, which I'll show you later. And essentially, they have done theorizing. So it is not just extension of theory, they are theorizing through different concepts together, and we'll see how it is happening later on. So the basic difference between a teaching case title, the teaching case title was enigmatic, the research case title is extremely focused. And there is never a protagonist in a research case. There are always participants. Even if you are interviewing one single person, that person is a participant. He is not a protagonist. Because the role of the protagonist in a teaching case is to ensure that the students are able to empathize with them. Here, you do not want researchers to empathize with anybody. You are simply taking data from this particular person, so they all are participants. And so the entire title is very focused, very tightly knitted, so that the objective and the contribution both are there in the title itself. Does that make sense? Are we on the same page? Is it making sense?
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
Okay, thank you so much. So how much time do I have? I can see in the recording, it's 1 hour 7 minutes. It's for 2 hours, right?
Ma'am, you have
Another.
Yeah, ma'am, you have 15 minutes more. 1 hour. Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
1 hour you have.
Because I couldn't finish it in 15 minutes. Okay, so that was about the title of a teaching of a research case. Now this is like any other abstract. Take a minute, read it, tell me what you see. I've again color coded it, and we'll discuss from there. So any thoughts?
Ma'am, very clearly one thing is stated that it's inductive theorization. That means on the basis of this specific case, a theory has been developed. That could be made quite clear in the abstract itself.
Yes. What else? What are the other components? Anybody else?
Ma'am, they have created some specific model also based upon this theories, whatever they have done, and it shows that they have followed total the research process. Like it's absolutely a research paper.
Exactly. So it essentially is a research paper. So
Right.
we should never forget that a case study research is also like any other research paper. The only thing is, for other researches, we try to understand the design of that particular methodology that you're taking up. Here also we need to understand the design that the case study research will take up. So it will be like any other research paper, only the main components of a case study will also come into picture. So like any other abstract, it is building the relevance. So you start with building the relevance of the study that you're taking and the purpose of the study. You're also talking about the methodology, briefly talking about the methodology that you have taken. You're talking about the case unit, the context. Again, the context is extremely important. The findings. So you briefly tell what you found and how you contributed to the further knowledge of the study. Okay, and finally the keywords, obviously, right? Coming to the introduction.
Ma'am,
Yeah.
I have a question. If you go
Sure.
to previous slide, can you guide me for understanding the research case paper and research paper abstract, that which point is actually specifically mentioned in the research case and not in the research paper?
Okay, so this is a very prominent question that comes up. At the end of the day, I always say this is like any other research paper. The only thing that makes it more, unique is the sample is very small. So you have a case unit. You don't talk about these many people you had interviewed or these many surveys you have done. You talk about the case unit and the context. In a normal case paper, in a normal research paper, we often, the context is generally too broad. Here the context is very bound. So if I have to quote the definition of what is a case study research, it suggests that study of a contemporary phenomenon in a bound context. So the context has to be very, very tightly knitted, and beyond that, whatever happens outside of that, you will not, you will, that is your limitation. You say that whatever case we are doing will be applicable in this context. It may be applicable in another context if there are certain similarities. So the unit is very small, the case unit or the sample unit is very small, and the context is very tightly knitted. In research papers, contexts are generally very broad. Okay, have I answered your question?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So coming to the introduction again, please take a minute. And I think we are on time, so I'll be able to complete it. But because this is a research paper and you've already been talking a lot about teaching cases, I really want you to take some time on research papers. They're very close to my heart. So any thoughts?
A review of literature has been done here, along with the insights from the authors is also covered. So I feel that the one in black looks like the insights of the author, looking at the literature review, whatever studies was done in the past.
Okay. Yes. Anybody else? Anyone else? So what I also try to do is, which I not thought earlier, was that I'll try to bust some myths about case research, and also try to identify points where people often make mistakes and hence face rejection. So in research case, the research case that is nowadays written, you generally do not have a literature review. What we often do is, as an author, we generally identify the phenomenon just by observation or listening to people. We don't go to the literature and identify gap, but we just try to observe a phenomenon, which can be, serendipitous phenomenon ki ekdam se samne aa gaya, and you say you're trying to understand what is happening. This is something that I don't know, and then you go back to literature and see whether it has been explained or not. So as researchers, if you're curious enough to understand a phenomenon that we are observing, we go back to the literature and we check whether it has been studied or not. And if not, that is when we start looking at the phenomenon in more depth. So a research case will be written only when there is limitation of knowledge on that phenomenon. This is different from research gap, because research gap comes out of literature review. So you already study a lot of literature. You see there are connections which are not complete, and that is where you find the gap. In research cases, you do it ulta. You find the phenomenon, you try to observe a phenomenon which you are not able to explain through current, then you go back to literature and you see that it cannot be explained through current knowledge, and then you try to see, okay, fine, how am I going to study it? How do I explain what is happening? And that is when you try to bound the context. So this is happening only in this region. This is happening only in this organization. That is where you start bounding the context. So it is always ulta, or the other way around. Any research paper, irrespective of what, which methodology you're using, should always start with explaining the phenomenon that we are studying. It's establishing the appeal of the phenomenon. Here, what people make mistake is they try to focus too much on the context. So a novice case researcher may start by explaining Kazakhstan instead of the phenomenon entrepreneurship. And that is where the first introduction only we reject. You are talking about the context. What is the phenomenon you are studying? So the focus should be on the phenomenon from the starting, and the appeal that why it is important to study. So you're also in this case, because there's a second phenomenon that they're studying. So they're the introduction of both the phenomenon. Then you say that these two have, so the authors saw that they are getting intersected in a particular organization in a particular context. But when they went back to the literature, they did not see any theories or any concepts that were helping them understand that how these intersections are taking place. So they found a limitation. So the literature review happens later, and it is only bound within that context. Then you build on the argument that why it is important to study this. So you are building the appeal of the phenomenon, then you are telling what is the limitation, and then you are arguing why it is important to study this limitation. So although extant literature covers business by religious organizations and the influence of religion on consumer culture, we don't know whether and how religion influences entrepreneur and the action when the entrepreneur gets initiated to a religion. So they're building the argument. And from there, your research question will come out. Mostly the research question in a teaching or in a research case is by how or why. We avoid what, because what only give descriptive answers. When we want to extend a theory or we want to create a theory, we generally look at how or why processes. So that you can say that, this is what happened, and so we are contributing to the current knowledge. So that is how your research question should be revolving around how and why. Then obviously you introduce the case unit, and finally, so we expect in SAJ BMC, South Asian Journal of Business and Management cases, we expect the authors to introduce in the first paragraph itself that what you are contributing. Some journals do not expect that. They don't say that, don't put your contribution in the first paragraph itself. But we want them to include it in the introduction, because any reader will not go forward if they don't see that the contribution is relevant for them. So it is a good idea to always include a contribution in the introduction itself. Again, that depends on the journal that you're submitting and the reviewers that they're reviewing. Are we on the same page till here? Any questions at this point?
Ma'am, I have a question.
Yeah.
Kindly correct me. So, ma'am, in some case, for example, if I'm submitting my papers without a contribution, so when you will be giving me the reply to put the contribution, so can I resubmit again the case studies paper after contributing the papers? How I can get the corrected view?
So that, so I'll tell you what we generally do. Okay, I cannot talk from other journals' perspective, but we generally, the first thing that we see is whether the structure of the paper is right. When we say structure, whether the person has actually used the case research design in the study itself. Are they introducing the phenomenon in the starting? Have they justified why have they used case? Now, one of the things that often people don't realize is that you don't always use a case research. You cannot just randomly decide that let's write a case research on it. There are certain factors that you need to keep in mind. So case research generally is written when there is something unique, that is something new is happening. That is one. Second, when you want to do a longitudinal study, that is the second thing. Third, when the so for instance, I recently wrote a paper on prison library. Now prison is a context which is generally very difficult to cater to, or you cannot really go. So when the study was difficult earlier and you get a chance to study it, then you use a case study. Or when one particular case is able to explain the phenomenon of an entire community. So often, for instance, vendors who are the street vendors. So if you study one street vendor, you will be able to say that, in this community, the rest of the street vendors are also doing something like this. So there are different, so we see whether the requirement of the case was actually there, or the author has just randomly written a case just because for the sake of it. So that is the second criteria that we look at. Then we see whether the methodology was properly described or not. Have they actually done the analysis or not? So if all those things are in place, then we may say that you can contribute. We can see that there is a contribution. So now you need to articulate it. So if we see the problem in the rest of the things, then it will be kind of best rejected. But if the rest of the things are fine, because the contribution is the thing that you write at the end. Even if it is written in introduction, you write it at the last of all. So as reviewers, we want the rest of the things to be in place to R&R. Revise and resubmit, we only say that. Have I answered your question?
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, just to clarify one more thing, that research question, do we need to limit any numbers for the research case? Like as a research paper, it's quite different. As you told, we need to be a little compressed in the research case. So in research question, do we need to limit ourselves while we are writing the research case paper?
Okay, let me just show you something. This is, I just kept it as a supplement question. In a research case, as I said, should generally have a how and why question, right? And it should be preferably issue-based. In normal research papers, you will generally have a hypothesis. In research case, you do not have a hypothesis. You are trying to understand a phenomenon in a context. So often in a research case, the question is generally very broad in nature. It is very issue-based, issue in the sense you don't just say that, okay, what is happening? You would try to understand that. So if you look here, information questions are not issue-based questions. You do not want a question which only gives descriptive answers. So how often do disabled people get bullied in healthcare section? So this is a descriptive. Even if you do a survey, you will find out. Evaluation questions: how does bully impact? So you're not trying to create relationships here unless you're doing a process study. But in a research question, in a research paper, your question is generally broad. It has to be how and why, so that it is explaining the phenomenon better, and it should be able to capture the different dynamics in one question. So the limit can be one question itself, maximum two. As soon as we start seeing that there are too many questions, we realize that the person is trying to do too much here, and we generally tell them that reduce the question, focus on one question, and go in depth in that question. I hope I've answered the question.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Thank you. Got it.
So going beyond the introduction.
Ma'am, one more question. If you you are already Asian journals editor, so is there any format specific that any other journals is very specifically they give, or we can search in their website that they want specific into this format only as a research case or as a teaching case, anything like that?
So we generally have sample, every journal has sample papers. Currently, our journal, the sample papers that are put in our journal, I would never want you to refer to that. Only look at the last two issues that from 2021 April and August issue. The structure of a research case. So every journal has a scope. Every journal give their format, and every journal is different in the way they want to communicate it. Right. So in our journal, because we are still transitioning into qualitative case study research, the sample papers that have been put by the SAGE publication is not what we want them to be. So there is already a conflict going on over there. But in general, what I can tell you about the structure of a research case that we would expect in our journal is this. There should be introduction, there should be theoretical background, you should explain the context. Sometimes the context is explained in the methodology itself. Then you should show the methodology, show the analysis. The methodology will include the analysis, the data, the participants, the data collection process and all that. Then you come to findings, discussion and conclusion, right? So this is what we look for. But every journal, so you have to go to the journal and see what they're expecting. We do not know any journal who is only taking qualitative case study research. And that is where we are trying to create our niche market. I hope I've answered that question.
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, you show that model is number, sequence is different. So is that?
No, that was for that. I'll just quickly tell you. So this is how I would generally write a case, because a case study research is generally inductive. So you collect data, and then the first thing that is, when you were drafting your manuscript, the first thing should be the finding section that you're putting in, the analysis section, that what did you find. When you're done with the analysis, that is when you will see which theory is getting connected over here. So you write the theory section second. Then you write the introduction, because the introduction will include what the theory is, what the case is about. So you start writing by, this is just the way I do my writing, but everybody has their own styles. I'd put it for somebody else to explain them. So if this helps, so you start by writing findings, theoretical background and discussion simultaneously, going to introduction, then explain the context, then the methodology, and finally the conclusion. So this is an easier way to work
Okay,
around.
got it, ma'am. Thank you. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. So let me go to the, okay, I think I switched on too quickly. Okay, so is it visible, the method thing?
Yes, ma'am, yes.
Yeah. So since we are running out of time, so what I'll do is I'll quickly show the sections here. So in the method, as I said, I just showed you the structure. The context in this particular case, they have included in the method itself. So the context and the relevance of the context. So as I said, the context will change the phenomenon. That's why you have to explain why this context is relevant to understand this phenomenon. Right? So not just explaining the context, but also creating the relevance. So if you read this, Kazakhstan provides a unique context of influence of religion on business. And then a small bit about the Kazakhstan itself. Then they have written the country was a part of the former Soviet Union and attained independence in 1991 after the collapse of Soviet Union. In the post-Soviet Union, post-Soviet era, religion became prominent, especially among the Turkish ethnic groups. Then they are basically telling that this context is relevant to study this phenomena in this particular context, right? Then we also explain why this particular case, the case unit or the sample that you have taken, how that will fit to explain the phenomena in the context. So the authors say, we selected Wheat Meat Burger and its group of companies for a case study, primarily the significant changes that the family business was experiencing when we initiated our study. The disruption in the family business due to the arrival of religion as a dominant logic is in some members of the TNT. So the group name is TNT, because he's a serial entrepreneur. So the overall brand name is TNT. Made it an extreme case. So when we say extreme case, it is similar to unique case. So extreme, unique are often used synonymously. So you are establishing why this particular case unit is good to study. How will it fit to study the phenomenon that we are trying to study? And then they have directly come to the data collection part. So here they have elaboratively said that data was collected through 3 sources: participant observation, open-ended and semi-structured interviews, and archival data. Now, a couple of things here. Mostly case researchers will have multiple sources of data. Why? Because we are trying, our case unit or the sample unit is very small, and we are trying to go in depth in that sample unit to understand the phenomenon. Now, in that case, having information only from one source may not give a holistic picture of it, and so we generally use multiple data. Archival data is generally used in process studies. So when we say process studies are those case researches wherein the phenomena is studied as a process. This is happening, then this is happening, then this is happening, this. So the entire process is being studied. In that case, archival data is taken. Why? Because archival data gives us the impression of the milestones that happened in that entire process. So how the process is changing will be reflecting in the archival data. Archival data is historical data. It could be documents. It could also be from the interviews of the people who have been working in that organization for long. So archival data will generally be in process studies. Not all case researchers will have archival data, but very robust case researchers will have archival data. And this is how they have given the visual representation of the, okay, so I think it has not changed. Has the PPT, okay, fine. It's changed now, right? You can see the diagram.
Yes, ma'am, yes.
Yeah. So the milestone diagram, if you can see here, so archival data, they have shown how, from where they have taken the data. Their observation and semi-structured interviews happened only in 2021. But to understand the entire process of how religion became a dominant logic, they have seen that in 1993 it was not there, and it only started influencing when the person who converted himself into Islam took over this particular organization. So they have shown the milestone. This is called a milestone diagram. Okay, and the top and the titles on the top, these are actually themes which we'll see later. So they have just shown in one particular diagram the things that they have collected, and they have also shown that where the themes that were found after data analysis, in which time period are those themes coming out. Okay, so we'll not be able to read the entire thing, but the crux is that your archival data and your other processes will help you to understand when what is happening, and that is called temporality. So this was happening temporarily, something happened, then it changed, and the context was changing when Soviet Union was collapsed. So the context changed, so that was so influenced disruption and things like that. So temporality is something that you're looking at when we are doing process studies. Okay, any questions here?
They have mentioned they have used atlas.ti. So is
Yes.
there a kind of a software or something?
Yes. So Atlas TI, NVivo, Mascuda, these are different softwares that are used to analyze qualitative data. I generally prefer manual data as well. So there is no compulsion, but yes, Atlas TI is one of a very robust qualitative data analysis software. The thing about these softwares are that people always get confused that it will automatically analyze our data. It is not that. It is simply a place where you can organize your qualitative data. The themes and the codes is still your responsibility to create. Some people who have come to me to learn how to do Atlas TI, they say, how do we auto code it? There is an option of auto coding, but it never gives robust results. So it is essentially to organize your data. You can look it up. Atlas TI for students, PhD students, they have at a very low cost for 2 years. 7,000 rupees, I think. You can use Atlas TI for 2 years in its full version. After that, you have to buy it. Similarly, NVivo, I think, also has it, but I've not used NVivo as particularly much. Otherwise, organizational, so institutional account you can also get. So our institution has an institutional account wherein simultaneously 3 people can work on their data. So there are different, you can look it up. I hope I've answered that question.
Thank you.
Coming to the analysis, so after the explaining the context, explaining the data collection process, and showing how that data collection was presented through that diagram, now they have come to actually how they analyze the data. So if you can see, they have written that they have inductive theory building from single case study. So this is a single case study. There are multiple case studies. There are cross case studies. We are not going into get into that. But generally, this kind of studies will have 3 order, first order, second order, and third order codes. Okay. So first order codes are like these. So through data, you are simply coding as a researcher, you start coding. Then you go to second order. Now, here what people often make mistake is they try to find how many times the same thing has come, and then they try to code it. That is done in content analysis, and that is also something the software can do it. The word cloud gives you too many numbers of same word coming out, so that is more significant. In this kind of study, we are not looking at too many numbers. We are trying to just see the connection between 2 different codes. So if you see the first order code, atheism versus religion, liberal versus orthodox. Now these are 2 different codes, but they are interconnected. And so the second order code that they have given is conflicts in logic. So it has to make sense, not from the point of view of multiplicity of the same code, but from the point of view is how it is falling in the entire phenomenon. So initially there was conflict of logics, and that has been showed by the first order codes, atheism versus religion, liberal versus orthodox. Are we on the same page? Am I making sense here? Any questions?
This is all developed, the themes are developed by the author themselves, or is there any set guideline to develop the themes? Do we need to refer to something to relate to a theme?
So there are multiple ways. One, the first order theme is always developed by the author. First order. By the time we come to the second order theme, that is when we start looking at the literature, that what the literature is saying about these themes. Okay. Now, another thing is that there are different ways in which you can present your data. What you're talking about is presenting your data, the format in which. So this is particular Gioia method, Gioia. So I don't remember the full name of the person. She has created this particular process of analyzing the data. You can look it up. Grounded theory is also used, so you can look that up as well. Sharma's method of grounded theory, so they also have a process of showing it. But more or less, they are all similar. The only difference between people get confused between content analysis and analysis in which themes are coming out is what I explained earlier. That in content analysis, we look at multiplicity. In themes, when we are trying to make sense of the data, that how they are interconnected with each other. So there is no one set format. This particular is one from Gioia. Okay. Have I answered
Thank
the
you,
question?
ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
So they have explained how they have come out with the themes. So into first order, second order, third order themes. Now the third order themes are mostly from the theory itself, because by the time you come to the final themes, you are also connecting it with the existing theories that are already available. So that is why you have to keep looking, and that's why case research, although it is simple because there is one place you have to get all the data from, but the analysis becomes it's a very robust process that you need to follow to show how you're contributing to the current literature. So there is always a to and fro of this. So you start by data, you go to literature, then you see that there's something else is happening, you go back to data, you go back to the field. So there is an iterative process. Yeah. So they have explained how they have gone. In the next section, we present an account of our findings. After this, they show the findings. Now in the findings, what you generally do is you start with the summary of the entire findings. So if you see the italicized words, influence, disruption, pragmatic, adaptation, creative combination, these are the main common themes that they are focusing on. So findings are generally started with the summary of all the themes together, and from there you go on and show one by one, you start explaining the theme. So if you look here, influence, disruption, these are the main themes, these are the second order themes, and the same thing you will see in the finding as well. Pragmatic adaptation, this first order theme, third order theme, then second order theme, modified boundary. This is how the entire findings section is explained. Can you see the paper? It's visible, right?
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
So you start explaining each of the theme that came out. And while you're explaining that, you also quote the participant. Again, remember, not the protagonist, the participant. So what the participant was doing, because you have to explain. In a teaching case, when you're quoting the author, the protagonist, you want the students to be able to empathize with that person. In a research case, when you're quoting the participant, you basically want to substantiate your themes. You want to show that, see, this is what I read, and that is why this theme has come out. So it is for substantiating or creating evidences of the data that you had analyzed. So that is the difference. So you don't randomly just choose a quote from the interview. You need to be very specific that if I'm explaining this theme, this quote will come. If I'm explaining this theme, this quote will come. A lot of people also try to include it in the experts or excerpts or the interview quotes in this data table itself. So there is a fourth column wherein they explain the quotes, but not necessary. You can explain it during the findings section itself. Now, this is the most important thing of a research paper, or any paper for that matter, the discussion section. Here they have titled it as the emergent process model of entrepreneurial dynamics with religion as new dominant logic. But essentially, this is the discussion section. The discussion section is where you show the contribution of your paper. And that is why you have to relate your findings in the discussion section with the current literature. And that's why the references you can see. So the entire paper you created, you analyzed to be able to contribute in certain way. That contribution has to be explained in the discussion section. How do we explain that contribution? Is by connecting it with the current data and showing that, see, the current data is saying this, but we have found this. There is some similarity in what we found, but there is some dissimilarity in what we found, and that is where your contribution lies. Okay, am I making sense here?
Yes,
You
ma'am.
understand? Okay.
Very, very clear.
So finally, if you see, they have summarized the discussion section and they have explained the findings. Now here I'll take a few minutes and I'll just read it out. Businesses, including family businesses, are influenced by a set of dominant logic. Now this is something that they have. This is their contribution. This is a traditional family business. A. So they are trying to create correspondence to their final model that they are proposing in here. And what they are doing is that what we found has also been talked in the literature, but they are all separate. Like somebody has said something, somebody else has said something, somebody else. We are trying to connect the dots here and we are trying to extend that literature. So you can see top management periodically reviews and renews the dominant logic through the process of organizational renewal. Now, this is again something that the literature has said and they have also found. So they have explained this. The inclusion of new, often unexpected logics may bring disruption and cause major organizational changes. This is where their contribution lies. Nobody else has said this, they are saying this. So this is where B, arrival of new dominant logic. So this is B, this is B. So what I'm trying to establish over here is that whatever your contribution is, you have to explain it with the previous literature and try to connect the dots that where it is falling short and where we have included our understanding. I hope that makes sense here. I'll take that as a yes. So before I go forward, anybody, what is the dominant logic? What is the theory of dominant logic?
I vaguely remember it is proposed by Dr. Prahalad.
Mm-hmm.
And hi.
No problem. So essentially,
kind of cognitive thinking. I don't remember much. I'm so sorry.
No problem, no problem. I just wanted to bring this out because sometimes we are not able to connect the dots because we don't know the meaning of it. So dominant logic essentially is a theory, obviously rightly said, proposed by Prahlad, and there was one more person, they together came out with it, which says that every person or every organization, every person leading an organization has their own ways of thinking based on their values and principles. And the way the organization will work will be influenced by those values and principles of the person. So the vision statement, the mission statement, and all those things, the strategies and everything will be influenced by that values and principles, which essentially are the dominant logic. Now, why I'm explaining this is so that you can make sense how religion became a dominant logic. So this person, the owner of this particular TNT Brothers, when he converted to Islam, he had this new principles which was leading him and which was driving his decisions on the business. And this is what they have shown in this entire paper, that how religion became a dominant logic. So the dominant logic theory already existed, but they have extended it by saying that religion can also become a dominant logic, which has not been probed earlier, or they could not find it earlier. Right? So that's why I was putting this forward. Now, not all papers will have this kind of dynamic model. This is a process paper and this is a theory building paper, and that is why this kind of model has come out. But generally, case researches that we receive are extension of theory. So they just simply explain how the theory has evolved further and not really create a new process or a new model out of it. So you don't need to really go into how do we make a dynamic model or how do we get it. You can also just extend a particular theory by suggesting that this theory has changed in this way. Now, one thing to remember is that the theory will always be identified later. So let the data tell you which theory is coming out of this picture. So we were having a workshop some time back in which one of the persons came and she said that, she comes from Uttarakhand, and Uttarakhand is a zone which gets a lot of disruption because of landslides and floods and all that stuff. So she said that I come from that place, and I know that people are very resilient because they're able to come out with solutions of rebuilding their business very fast, irrespective of what disaster they have gone through. So she was already fixated with the theory of resilience. So what we suggested was that don't get fixated. So you have observed a phenomenon, you have seen that something unique is happening over here, which is different from other contexts. So let the data speak and then see why people are able to do it. Don't just get fixated from the very beginning. Because she went to the literature before starting to collect data and tried to see, okay, what are the theories that are explaining this? Now, that is where we often fail to build new theories. So the chance is there to build new theories, but because we get so much fixated with one particular theory from the very start, we are not able to create new theories. So try to avoid that. Let the data take it forward.
So, ma'am, through this case research, is it possible to propose a new case? I mean, a new theory? Can we do that?
Absolutely. I would suggest you to look at Joya and Anne Langley, these two, and Eisenhardt, Kathleen Eisenhardt. These three have proposed how to develop theories from cases. So nowadays, AMJ, Human Relations, these are the top, FT50 journals. They take a lot of research cases which are building theories. Now, somebody was asking in one of the workshops is how do we generalize it? In case researchers, we are not necessarily generalizing something. We are proposing a theory which can or cannot be used in different contexts. But what we are doing is we are particularizing. So generalizing in the sense is coming from statistics, how statistical generalizability can be developed. In case researches, we are not trying to identify statistical generalization. We are trying to understand in that particular context how this particular case is able to change the phenomenon, so that any other context which could be similar can use similar theory to understand what is going on over there. So it is more of particularization. I hope I'm making sense here.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
So finally, these are the models, a dynamic, So first one is the milestone, this one in which we are seeing the archival data is the milestone model. This is the data structure, we call it data structure, and this is the dynamic model. Not all papers have a dynamic model, but they will have a data table. Now, data table is like any other table wherein you detail the participants, number of participants. We have this, number of participants, age, demographic, and all that. Similarly, the milestone table is nothing but the data table. What were the data that we used and how are we representing it, right? And the data structure should be there. So we look for this in papers. So one of the things that we often reject on is what people do is they say that we have collected qualitative data, but they don't show how they've analyzed it. They don't show these first, second, third order themes, and so they simply say that this happened, and they just describe the entire incident, and that's it. And so we immediately reject such papers. So these generally, the first two tables are very important. It could be participant table or it could be archival table. Both of them are fine as long as you are showing what your data is and how it is relevant to the case. Finally, the contributions, limitations, and future research. Obviously, we have to state contribution. We have to reiterate the limitation and what we did to understand that. We also suggest the quality that, you know, the transferability, and we do not have reliability, we have transferability, credibility. You can look it up. We don't have time for it, but you can look it up. So qualitative research has different quality parameters as compared to research case. Stating limitations, obviously every paper should state limitation. We often get papers which do not state limitation, and that is where we feel that the reference lies. So somebody will refer to your paper when they will see that this paper is ending over here and this paper is stating that these are the future things that they could have done. So if you do not include the limitations in the future studies, people will not really refer to your paper. They will only refer if you have done a good contribution. So to be able to get your paper citable, the contribution should be stated, obviously, but the limitations and the future study should also be stated. One thing that was missing in this paper was that the explanation of the theoretical background. After the introduction and before the methodology, one needs to explain what is your theoretical background. In this case, they have not done it, and we had a reasons of, you know, allowing this case going forward. But every paper, be it case research or a other qualitative research, theoretical background, which is also called as theoretical anchoring, or it is also called as theoretical motivation, should be included. In this case, the theoretical background was the dominant logic and entrepreneurial studies. So after the introduction, the author should have written that my paper is based on this theoretical background, and what other papers have done, and it should be limited only to this context. So we should not go on writing like we write in a literature review that, you know, this person has said this, this person has said this, this person has said this. We generally focus on what we are studying, and only those relevant papers should be cited in the theoretical background. Okay. Any questions?
So is theoretical framework and this the same? Because when it is a normal research paper, they ask for it.
I get it. So theoretical frame, you can also use a theoretical framework. Theoretical framework is nothing but when different theories are come together and they create one explanation of the entire phenomenon. Theoretical frameworks are used in research papers because the paper is built on those frameworks. So the hypothesis is coming out of those frameworks. In case research, we avoid theoretical framework because then the data that you are using, that is being analyzed, you will have to force it to those theoretical frameworks. Am I making sense here? Theoretical background is mostly broad. So you may take multiple concepts and say that these things have not been studied together, so we are doing it. But we generally try to avoid, but yes, you can use a theoretical framework in a research case as well. It's not a problem.
Okay, thank you, ma'am.
So that's how we disseminate knowledge in teaching case, and we create knowledge in research case. Just to give you a picture of where you can submit your teaching cases, there are repositories and there are journals. These are the journals that you can send your teaching cases to. Repository, obviously I have not included HBR because HBR, it's difficult to directly send it to them. And a research case can be published in any journal which publishes qualitative studies, and obviously our journal as well. So that's my time. I hope I have completed on time. I'm not taking too much extra time. Thank you. Any questions here? Anybody there?
Ma'am, there's a question on the chat, and I think that's what even I was thinking. What is the sample size for conducting a case based on the research?
So that's what I was saying. See, sample is not what we are looking for. What we are generally looking for is the unit of analysis, which can be single, it could be double, but they are generally single entities. We are not looking for sample size per se, because we are not trying to generalize things, right? So in other qualitative studies also, the sample size is generally low. In case research, the sample size could be one individual to hundreds of individuals in one organization, the organization that you're studying. So your case unit will define what will be your sample size. So if you're doing a study on one individual and his experience, the sample size could be one individual itself. If you're trying to understand the how an organization was able to fight the situation or the crisis management that COVID had brought in, then the sample size within that organization could be more. But your unit will be single only. So it will be one organization, wherein you can also say how HR department was able to keep people motivated. So maybe your sample size could only focus on that HR department and the people in that department, right? So that will vary on what you're trying to understand. There is no hard and fast rule on that. I hope I've answered that question.
Hope so, ma'am. It was from Dr. Mohammed. Ma'am, leading from that, now when I'm conducting a research paper, we usually keep the evidence till we have the paper published or even beyond. Is that the same case with case study? Now, in case I had an interview done and I had recorded that session, would that evidence be needed? I'm sorry, did I get my question right?
Yeah. Can you hear the question?
Hello?
I think, ma'am, some network issues is hanging on.
Audible now?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I mistakenly logged out of the system in which I was speaking, and I was so I could only see you, but I could not speak. Yeah. So that was about it. Any questions or?
Yeah, I was just asking, leading from your answer, what do we have to keep evidences when we conduct research cases? Because when we have papers done, we keep our questionnaires and we keep our answers of transcripts and all that. So is it the same case when we do with case study as well?
Exactly. So you have to create evidences, and that is where archival data and all those. So you have to. There's a case protocol you can look up on Robert Yin. He has created a case protocol which basically says how you are supposed to ensure that you have your evidences in place and be organized. So you can look it up. I have recently published two chapters in a book on case method that was launched this month only.
Was it on the digital natives?
Yes.
The
So
same
that
book?
has, yes, the same book. So there are two chapters on it. They're too long. That's why I have not shared them. But you can always, if you want, I can share that. But don't take that as assessment wala thing, because it will be little difficult to comprehend. But they have all these answers. Anything else?
Ma'am, it was a great session. Thank you so much for all your insights and really puts everything into perspective and gives a new direction to research. I was always into empirical study, but this is really good. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. So shall we leave now?
Thank you so much, Dr. Shreya.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for having
Dr.
me.
Shreya, thank you so much. Yeah, because Dr. Day also appreciated you a lot. He says that she looks very young, but she's very knowledgeable and very practical in her orientation when she speaks on the topic and all, and you really made it to that. Thank you so much, and I hope that our participants they certainly will get some benefit out of that. So over to you, Mr. Vinay.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, ma'am. On behalf of AICT, Atal Academy, New Delhi, and St. Joseph's College of Commerce, Bangalore, the organizing committee extends a sincere gratitude for taking time out of your busy schedule and sharing your insightful thoughts on teaching case, and also explaining the structure of research case in detail. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you so much. See you sometime soon. Okay, take care. Bye-bye.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah,
dear participants, we will break for lunch now. You are expected to join back by 2:25, and the next session, the third session for the day, will start at sharp 2:30 p.m. Thank you.